Yeah.
But I was telling Rylie today, like part of an anointing hit. We were doing this, but I would never be sitting here if it weren't for him. I'm so aware of that all the time. So, all right.
Because it's like, you can tell when we're like actually just talking here.
Yeah.
And then it goes in the boom.
Yeah.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome to Rawthentic Radio with Eric and Rylie. Thanks for joining us again. Today, we're really talking about what the foundation of being rawthentic in your life is. Yep. And so here's the title of our talk today. It is Muscle versus Insta Glory. Muscle versus Insta Glory. And really, we're talking about this because sometimes the thing that keeps you from growing the internal muscle that you need is actually this facade that you put up, this Instagram glory that you put up and write in your captions and your perfectly edited photos.
Your filters that make you look so pretty.
Exactly. And those are the things that sometimes actually keep us from being ourselves. So really what we're talking about is being known. Yep. But why this is important is because being known is what leads to this internal muscle, also called authority.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about today. And I actually, I believe that our authenticity, the depth of our authenticity is directly linked to our authority.
Yep.
Meaning I'm only as authoritative as I am first authentic.
Because I actually think in what we're experiencing right now, where everybody is being so careful not to be seen as, and you can fill in the blank because there's so many blanks that we're all trying to avoid.
Yeah.
I just want to be Insta perfect. I want everybody to know that I love everybody and I wouldn't want to make any ruffles anywhere.
Yeah.
And truth is somewhat vacant in a lot of our circles of communication today.
And in a lot of our relationships.
Right.
And so we do battle with that Insta glory, and we use Instagram kind of as just a gauge, but that Insta glory type of facade that we put up. So just notice in your life, when you post an Instagram anything, come on now, how much effort do you really put into that? Because like guilty is charged.
That's everybody's guilty as charged.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there.
Yep.
And this isn't just an idea that we have. One, it's an experience that we've walked through and are walking through.
Right.
And also the authority being connected to being known is scriptural.
Not only is it scriptural, but if you look around you and you look at sometimes older people who still have some physique left, it's not an accident.
No.
There's a reason for that.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite stories in the Bible, and I'm going to spin through this pretty quick, but it's in 1 Samuel 13, and it's talking about Saul and when the Philistines came to attack him. So it says the Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the seashore. And then it tells where they went up to meet them. And then I'm going to skip over to chapter 14. In the middle, between 13 and 14, Samuel actually comes to Saul and tells him, you've been passed over. You disobeyed God.
You've been rejected as king.
Exactly. And so I think that's how a lot of us feel. We've been rejected.
Yep.
And that's also Jonathan, Saul's son. He is the son of the rejected king.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have a pedigree anymore, whether he knows it or not.
Yep.
And he's just hanging out. And it says that everybody's hiding. And Saul had 600 men. I've always loved this story, but when I went back to chapter 13 and read how many Philistines were there, I was like, dang.
Yeah, as many as the sand on the seashore.
Exactly. So it was a little uneven.
Yeah.
That's how I think a lot of people feel in today's world. There's so many things going on right now, and so much is spinning.
And so much is coming up against us.
Right. That we all feel small.
Yeah.
So I love the story, and I'm just going to read parts of it. In verse 6, it says, Jonathan said to his young armor bearer, "Come, let's go over to the outpost of these uncircumcised Philistines. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saying, whether by many or by few." And I thought it was so powerful. He said, perhaps the Lord. He didn't go, I'm going to make a positive declaration. This is what's going to happen. He's like, perhaps the Lord.
Yeah.
But he had enough courage and enough muscle in his faith man to actually do something and risk without any promise that it was going to turn out well.
Yep, that's good.
Kind of like what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool because his armor bearer says, do all that you have in mind. Go ahead. I am with you, heart and soul.
Yeah.
It's so important who you spend your time with, that they also are ready to lift weights.
Yeah.
And go after spiritual physique.
Because a lot of the people that we're running with can't keep up with us.
Who you run with helps set the pace for your life.
Yeah.
And so
we slow down for them.
Right. Or sometimes if I'm running with the right people, I run harder because I'm not going to be left behind.
Yep.
I might not be able to be at the front, but you ain't leaving me behind.
Totally.
So Jonathan, after his armor bearer said, go ahead, I'm with you, Jonathan said, come then, we'll cross over towards the men and let them see us. Now listen to this. This does not make sense. This is a stupid strategy. If they say to us, wait there until we come to you, we'll stay where we are and not go up to them. That sounds smart. But then he says, but if they say, come up to us, we will climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands.
Stupid.
Totally stupid. And that's actually what I feel like in today's world. So many of us are being called into places to stand or to climb a cliff towards something that looks like sure death.
Yeah.
So both of them showed themselves to the Philistine output, and the Philistines actually said, look, the Hebrews are crawling out of the holes they're hiding in. The men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan, his armor bearer, come up to us and we'll teach you a lesson.
Yeah.
And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. That is so powerful. And it says they climbed up, and in the first attack, which to me is like, wait a minute, these two guys climb over the edge of the cliff and then get up, and they killed 20 men. But it says after they killed those 20 men, of the amazing number of chariots, charioteers, and men as numbered as the sea, it says, then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp and field and those in the outpost and raiding parties, and the ground shook. It was a panic sent by God.
Wow.
And then Saul's army, they were all in hiding.
Yeah.
But they saw what was happening, and then they came to the attack. But the victory was because of two people who had the courage to step into what actually looked impossible.
Yeah.
But they risked because they had internal spiritual muscle. So that's what we actually want to talk about today. How do you develop that?
That's so powerful, because few people actually talk about how can I have that authority. We look at heroes of faith. We look at stories like Jonathan and David and or the armor bearer, and we're like, man, I want that so bad. But nobody actually tells us like how we get to that. Little attention is ever given to how do I develop that internal muscle? How do I get to that place where I'm actually walking in authority? Because authority is what these guys were walking in. When everybody else was running, this is what they were defying what everyone else said is normal.
Yep.
Even as we read it, we're like, this is a stupid idea, but they're doing it. And authority is where we're running towards a battle that everybody else is running from.
Yep, they're all hiding out.
Everybody, and authority is so key in our lives, but no one knows how to get there. And I would just say in my own life, I lacked this. I would second guess everything. I would overanalyze everything and call it logic. But really, I lacked authority because, one, I didn't know myself. Yeah. And two, I didn't know myself because I didn't have people around me who knew me to speak into my life and remind me of my identity. And so, I'm in this place right now where I've shared it before, but after 8 years of being on a church staff and being in a ministry and serving, I've stepped away because I feel like this is what the Lord has led me to. And to a lot of people, that looks really dumb. And as I stepped into this place,
it's kind of like climbing a cliff.
Yes. Climbing a cliff and saying, if you tell me to come up, we're going to go attack them. It's like, what? But that's what it is. Yeah. And it's because of really our relationship that modeled it for me. But I was able to step into a place of, wow, I'm actually going to choose to be known. And as I was known and fully known for who I was and all the pain, all the mess included, my identity began to build. And it got me to a place where I've known who I am, not in an arrogant way, but in a Psalm 139, this is who God made me way, to the point where I'm able to, for example, this is an example, run toward a battle that most people would run away from. And during the season of COVID, to step out of a guaranteed paycheck, because sometimes what God's going to call you to is going to take that internal muscle, but you'll never get there. You will never get to that place where we're doing these things and being obedient to God unless we know who we are and we're being known in relationship.
I actually think in faith circles that process never stops.
Totally.
And so
and I'm not there. I've not reached
none of
it.
us are.
Yeah.
Because if we feel like we can do whatever's in front of us without God, it's probably not God's vision anyway.
Yeah.
Because whatever he calls us to, me starting to do this, I would not have been able to do that had you not said, this is what we're going to do. And then pushed when it came time.
And that took some time, right?
Oh, that took like 3 months to process.
Yeah. And a lot of times we want to separate it, right? So I've had, when we first put our first episode out, I remember going to a dinner with my dad and my mom and then one of my dad's friends. And I love this guy. He comes up to me. He's like, dude, your guys' podcast was so awesome. You're speaking so much truth. But you guys talked about being known. And you were kind of asking like, why? Why do I need to be known? Why do I need to, why should people know some of these deep, secretive parts of my life? And the reason really is because we cannot compartmentalize authority with ourselves from authority with people.
Right.
And here's what I mean for leaders. We can't have congregational authority if we don't have personal authority.
Right.
I'm never going to be able to hop on a stage or in front of a boardroom or whatever and speak confidently unless I'm living that out first in my life.
It's actually not even speaking confidently because some people can pull that off.
Yeah.
Because that's a great filter.
That's true.
Some people have great gifts of articulation, but they're not able to sustain relationship. Like there's a lot of powerful leaders who can speak confidently, they can do some amazing things, but they cannot sustain relationships with their leaders. And so they're a revolving door.
Yes. And this is what I was exactly kind of what I was sharing with him, that really when it comes down to it, I believe that we're only as strong as our closest relationships are first real.
Right.
I'm only going to be as strong in my life as my closest relationships are first real. And I'm in this place where I'm known. And there is a connection between these things. Like you can't separate these things.
Well, and the powerful thing is when you truly have authority, you're not worried about how big other people are. True. People who don't have personal authority might have their microphone, but they make sure that everybody else is a midget.
Yeah.
Next to them.
And they surround themselves with people who are weaker.
Right. And whenever you have authority, you actually draw giants to you because you're on your way to being a giant yourself.
Yeah.
It's only when you begin to really do the things that we're getting ready to start talking about in this session that you really begin to attract giants to
That's
yourself.
good. That's so good.
Because you got to be on your way to being one. And if you don't know who you are in Christ and your identity is not set, and it's more than just I'm on my way to heaven, but it's beginning to really have a identity, and from that, a vision to grow for your own life.
Yep.
When you have vision for your life, you're not threatened by other people who have vision that's different from yours.
That's good.
And so we're not afraid to pull people in who seem to be even more talented than we are.
Yeah.
And we don't do this, which we love.
You don't put a finger down on them and
there's no
control
money
them.
at church. So it's all about power in a lot of places and faith circles.
Yeah.
So we love when you truly walk in authority, you draw people to you.
Yes. And so it's really what we're talking about, Insta glory or muscle.
Right.
Meaning be real, walk in real relationship, or live that facade, and you're going to lack a lot of what Eric just talked about.
Right.
And so if ultimately we're saying it's about authority, it leads to, it produces this authority. Right. How come it's so hard, Eric, to like walk this out? Why is it so uncomfortable to be known? Because
it requires vulnerability, and it's the opposite. Most people feel like if I'm going to be a giant in the kingdom, I need to look like a giant.
Yeah.
And it's totally upside down, because a lot of times people, they'll feel like I'm transparent. And so people will be drawn to the transparency, but transparency is simply, I let you know my information.
Yeah.
If I didn't do something well, then here, I'm going to be accountable, which is such an overused and meaningless term so far as becoming a true giant in the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so we will choose transparency instead of being known.
That's so good.
Because being known is, how did I have that blowout, whatever it is?
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, it's, I eat too much. For me, once I began to get on top of sexual addiction, I began to notice, wow, my waistline is expanding.
Wow.
And I didn't look like it. No one would even know, but I knew inside myself, wait a minute, these two things are connected.
Yes.
They look different.
One of these things are like the other.
Right. And one of these things, I'm like despicable scum of the earth according to how we rate sins.
Yeah.
And the other one, that's all right, bro.
Yes.
Let's go get a piece of pie after church.
But I think what you just said is key, because being known, having spiritual muscle, it's not about accountability as we say it in faith circles. It's about real, raw, honest transparency.
Yeah.
This is where I'm at in my life. This is what I'm struggling with. Right. And this is something that's very, very vulnerable, as Eric said, but it is so worth it. It is so rewarding. And I think oftentimes there's a lot of unhappy Christians out there who struggle, like, bless the Lord, give me today my daily bread. They're doing the whole, they're showing up, their attendance it's on point, but they lack joy.
Right.
And I wonder, and I believe that's because there's actually a whole side of them that nobody knows.
Right.
There's these little compartments that some people know about this, some people know about this, but no one's going to ever fully know my true self, because if they did, then I'm in trouble. And so I just wonder if there's a lot of people who are leaving the church because the people outside the church are happier than we are, because the Christians are struggling with the same sin as the people out in the world, but they're just not hiding it.
Well, it takes a lot of desire to actually choose to develop authority.
Explain that.
I know myself in the last 2 years, I'm 64. And in the last 2.5 years, I have really made some major strides towards developing my own authority. But sadly, I waited all these years, and I actually sent a text through Instagram to one of my young friends. He's probably 35. and told him, I'm actually trying to be as real as I can so you can skip my last 20 years and step into a level of joy that you've not had before. I think that's one of our common goals that we've talked about with Rawthentic. We actually want we want to shift faith culture.
Yes.
So you can begin to tell the truth and find your way out of all the cliches and all of the mess we create to actually just, this is who I authentically am, and to be safe in bringing that person forward.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of people are living out a life that God never called them to.
Right.
It's just secondhand theology.
Yeah.
It's learned theology that's actually not scriptural. It's just kind of, it's cultural. And there's a difference between kingdom culture and church culture at times. At times. And I would just, that's what we're about is, man, we would just love to invite people into this real place of saying, here's my life. Here's the good, the bad, the ugly. And there's just such a joy and a freedom in saying, I'm still loved. And I'm still pursued, So
I think one of the things that would be good, and we actually spent a minute looking at some of this stuff, is to talk about what are some of the consequences to your friend's question. Because I think a lot of people have that silent question, if they even have thought through, I don't have much muscle in the kingdom, versus trying so hard to serve in the Sunday school teacher position, which all of that is good. It's all good. But if you don't truly develop spiritual muscle, you're simply doing things that are not going to bring you joy, and there's going to be no power or anointing in what you're doing.
And it actually doesn't really honor God.
Yeah.
Because it's not from a genuine place.
Right. So I think part of our motivation with Rawthentic has been to just encourage people to not be afraid to talk about things. And that's why we're actually starting to talk about our lives, things that we've experienced.
And that's the key, I think, too, is to remember, like, we're talking from our lives.
Right.
And we're not here to point fingers. We're just saying, hey, here's what I walked through, and here's some freedom that I found. John.
And we're continuing to walk through, and we're continuing to find freedom.
Yes. And it's not easy. But, and I've learned so much through your life. Eric, you've lived so openly with me. And it's really given me a muscle that I can now look into myself for and like begin to believe like, hey mate, I can walk this thing out too. But it wasn't always easy, right? Like there's some resistance that comes against being fully known. And
I think a lot of it was my own resistance within myself.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of spiritual sons and daughters. I've always been super open about my life, super transparent about my life, but I never really chose to be known in the moment.
Yeah.
So how that would play out is I would go through some extremely painful things. And so if I made a wrong choice in numbing myself to that pain, I would very candidly be transparent.
Yes.
But it felt almost like making excuses.
Yeah.
To really look into that and go, wow, how could I have done that differently? Or where did that pain come from?
Yeah.
Or what's the source of it? And so I continued to numb my pain.
Yes.
Not all the time, just when it became so high that it was almost unmanageable.
Yep.
But what that created in my own life was I dated some amazing women, but I would step back from really moving forward towards marriage because I felt like they deserved somebody who had less baggage than me.
Wow.
And then over time, slowly, that became a mindset. So I no longer, after a while, I realized I'm not going to stop being broken. It never occurred to me that, and a lot of that was the perspective that I chose to come under, that is in faith circles sometimes, where this is not going to change and this is who you are.
Yeah.
So I would be offered a microphone on a platform and I would shrink back.
Yeah.
And the more that I had these private, like I would have failures, I had a lot of success working one-on-one with people.
Yeah.
So I always had a lot of belief. I'm apostolic and gifting, so I always had a lot of belief for anyone. And because of my own background, I would never leave anyone. But when it came time for me to work on my life, I was a throwaway in my mind. And so my authority, the longer that I walked with this mentality, the more it's kind of like roller derby.
Yeah.
Where you reach behind you and you grab whoever's, and probably if you've never watched television on roller derby.
Don't.
Well, it's a redneck sport, but it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
Reach behind you and you whip them.
Yeah.
And they go on around you. And that's how I always saw myself. I won't leave anybody behind, and I'll just whip them around me, and they'll go on into their
and
great
you're fine
destiny.
with being at the back of the line.
Yeah, I'll stay at the back of the line because that's what I really deserve.
Wow.
So it wasn't until the last couple of years that I began to realize, wait a second, I actually have a purpose myself. And I started refusing to leave myself behind. So if you're actually listening to our podcast and you're out there somewhere and you're close to my age, like 40s, 50s, 60s, and you have left yourself behind and you're basically counting time until, you get to go to heaven, or hopefully people love you until you die. Mm-hmm. I want to encourage you to step beyond that. That's a boundary that you've chosen. So often we don't realize that we've chosen those boundaries, but that's a boundary you've chosen. And I just so encourage you to refuse to settle and to get back in the game. There are ways you can do that. We're going to talk about some of the consequences of not being known. And I obviously have decades of experience, so I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about later on how you can choose to be known.
Yeah. And so I think what I love about what you're talking about is you're saying ultimately you were transparent with, if I'm not going to keep a secret. If I act out and I screw up, I'm going to be open about it. That's not what we're talking about.
No, and I actually felt like when I would step back, I can remember 5 really powerful women that I dated that I really liked a lot. It felt like integrity to me to step back from them and let somebody that in my mind had less baggage than me to step into my slot.
Yes.
Because that felt like you need to be honest with yourself.
Yes. And I think that, again, that's an authority issue.
It totally was. Because total authority.
Because you don't know you in those moments, so you're not stepping into those opportunities.
It was behavior oriented. I knew my behavior.
Yeah.
And I was very honest about my behavior.
Yeah.
Not only with myself, but with people that were covenanted or close to me. But I didn't have my destiny.
Yeah.
I had no vision for my life because I never developed authority that went beyond behavior.
Mm-hmm. And just confessing your sin, that is not what we're talking about.
Over and over and over again. No, it's not.
Because that's what a lot of people maybe think we're talking about. We're not talking about, I'm just going to confess my sin. Do we do that?
Transparent.
Yes. But here's what we're saying. If I wake up one morning and I'm struggling and there's just things that are cloudy in my head, I'm going to text him and just say, hey, struggling today, just being known. Mm-hmm. For some reason, my mind's cloudy. If I can, at the front end, be transparent and be open, then I'm not going to have to text him later that night on the back end and let him know about this huge mistake that I made. That's the power of being known.
Yep.
That's the authority of being known in the relationships that you build.
Yes.
And so we just want to close by talking about, here's some of the consequences that we've both experienced, the consequences of not being known, of not walking in this level of authority and relationship. And here's the first one. We're just going to read off a couple. When we don't talk about what's going on inside of us, it many times minimizes what's actually going on.
So here's how that played out in my life. You don't realize it, but you'll take a little step to the right, and then another little step to the right, and then another little step to the right, and pretty soon you're falling off the edge of the cliff because no one knew. You didn't tell anybody where you were really at.
Exactly.
And so you don't know where you're really at.
Yeah.
Because that's how sin, and by the way, we want to define sin. Sin for us is simply missing the mark.
Missing the mark for God.
Right.
With God.
Right. So you'll when you step off the edge of the cliff, that never would have happened if you had been known, because somebody would have gone, hey, you're getting really close to the edge of the cliff.
Yes.
Knock that off.
And we've both been around cultures that make this very difficult.
Right.
Where it's like, hey, if you're not going through hell, keep on going. And it's like there's some sort of strength attributed to people who don't feel their pain.
Right.
And who get hit and just keep going.
It's
and
macho Christianity.
It's macho, and that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And it's really exactly what he's saying. When you feel just a little bit off to the right, do you have somebody in your life that you can have that conversation with? And what we're trying to tell you is like, what you're facing, you're not stuck. It feels like you're stuck. It feels like you're overcome by this addiction, by this, whatever you want to call it, the vice. You're not. Your heart is craving connection. It is craving intimacy, and it needs someone to process it with. And so tomorrow morning, if you wake up and you're feeling a little bit off, as Eric said, to the right, man, reach out to that friend. And if you don't have it, begin it. Call them and say, hey, I'm struggling, because chances are they're probably struggling too. And just call them and be like, hey, I want to begin to do relationships a little bit different. And I'm just going to be really open with you. Here's where I'm at. And it's just such a powerful thing.
Yep.
All right. And the second consequence is this: silence is actually lying to those who we're closest to. If you have anyone in your life that you're that close to, yep. That's a consequence of not being known, is that literally we are lying because we're not bringing our true selves forward. And this is something that, man, I've struggled with. This is something that I've walked and am still walking through. Is it's so tempting to remain silent about certain things for everybody else's comfort. Yep. But it robs them of the opportunity to love me where I'm at, like Jesus would love me.
Right.
While we were yet sinners, the Bible says Christ died for us. While we were fully known, we were fully loved. And so when I've refused to be fully known with you, it robs you of the opportunity to love me in the way that Jesus would love me. And so really, ultimately, when I'm not choosing to be known, I'm lying to you. Yeah. And it's I'm not bringing my full true self forward.
Right. And you don't do that with everybody, but
no,
it's with your closest friends.
Those you have covenant relationship with, which we'll talk about in another episode.
The next one is whatever is hidden from you dilutes your authority. This is such a big one.
Yes, it is. There's so many things in your life that you don't see. And in my life, actually, I'll keep it personal. There's so many things in my life that I didn't see. And because of those things in my blind spots, those were areas in which I couldn't actually grow. I couldn't actually go forward. I couldn't actually do what Jonathan and the armor bearer did and take the hill, because I'm just allowing these lies to continue to affect my life. And that's the ultimate thing. What you don't see actually affects you.
And not only that, if you can't see areas of your life that you need healing in, then you can't go after healing.
Exactly.
And so
you don't know what you don't know.
Right. And so I settle for a lesser level of life that I'm supposed to settle for, and I don't even know I'm settling.
Yes. And that's the power of being known, is that there's times where you see something that I'm not seeing.
Right.
And I give you access to speak to those things in my life.
Right.
And I'm growing these muscles all around that I didn't even know I had in the spirit.
Why you got to flex like that?
Come on. Let's keep it about the main thing. And here's the deal. Hidden sin is caused by hidden pain.
Yeah.
And this just further proves the point that what we don't see dilutes our authority. Hidden sin is because of hidden pain.
Well, a lot of times whenever people do very destructive things in their life, or they'll make a choice and you're like, and everybody gathers around to stone that person. Mm-hmm. We would never say that in faith circles, but
it's what it feels like.
Exactly. We don't realize that a lot of times that person is as stunned as we are, mm-hmm. because they really didn't know what was happening. and people are like, you're always responsible. Yes, you are responsible. But a lot of times you'll have situations occur in your life that you had no idea you were capable of.
Yep.
But you were unknown, off the edge of the cliff into something that was a lot bigger than you thought it was.
Yes. And we get so distracted
completely.
We get so distracted that we don't even notice we're taking this off ramp.
Right. And because it's hidden from us, it's in plain sight. If we actually just have the time or would take the time to go chase it down.
Yes.
But when we're not known by anyone, then we don't realize, wow, this area of my life's getting totally out of control.
Yep.
Because we are masters of Insta glory.
We are.
I've got a filter for this and I've got a filter for that.
Mm-hmm.
And let's do that one in black and white because I think it'll look better if we do it in black and white and caption this.
Yes. You know how you can hide your stories from certain people?
Yep.
We do that with our truth sometimes.
Yep. Or our not truth. Like we do that with our not telling the truth.
Yes. Silence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then fourthly, here's a consequence it's deeply lonely.
Yeah.
A consequence of not being known, it will lead to deep loneliness. And I cannot stress this enough that there are people right now looking at me who do not know why that they're feeling the thing that they're feeling, the isolation, the fact that you feel like you're on an island by yourself. You think it has something to do with your worth or even decisions that you've made. Listen, we've both made some of the worst decisions that you can make in your life, and I'm not living in loneliness because I've made these tough decisions to be known. And I'm just telling you right now that if you will step into this and pray and ask for the right people in your life, God will begin to honor that and honor that truth that you desire to walk in and bring people in your life that you can walk these things out with. But I'm telling you, the loneliness is not attached to your behavior alone. It's attached to the fact that you're walking through your pain alone.
Yeah. So we want to actually create through our podcast, Rawthentic Radio, just to shift culture enough or to shift your culture enough, your personal culture, to where you can choose to be known.
Yeah.
And I actually want to pray over you. If you're watching our podcast, we're done with this episode. But I want to pray over you that I just pray that God would set you free from the mindset that who you are is not worth being known.
Yeah.
And that you would realize how precious you are.
And that you need to hide.
Yeah. And that you would have courage and that the Lord would, I just ask the light and fire of the Holy Spirit to burn everything around you right now that would keep you from just acknowledging and knowing how precious you are and that God will give you answers and he'll give you resources if you just ask him, God, help me. I want to be known and I want to know other people. Help me to walk out of this. So we just bless you tonight.
And watch your internal muscle begin to grow.
Yep.
We're taking this a step further on the next episode as we talk about, okay, how do I actually walk this out practically? Yep. We're going to talk about that next time. Thanks, guys.
Build some muscle.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out our podcast.
Yeah, we're not actually here to debate. We're just here to make you think.
Yep. We actually don't think we have all the answers, but we just love having the conversation. So do us a favor, hit subscribe. If you liked it, share it. Give us a like. If you didn't like it, no problem. Okay. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.